Well, hello and good day to you all. I hope that you're all doing well. I appreciate you checking in on this video. This video today is going to be a bit shorter than what I've done in the past. Really, my only intention today is just to give you, an update from what the elders talked about last night. We had a lengthy meeting about reopening the church and what that would look like. So Governor Walz last week announced that he was going to allow churches to start opening up to 25% of their fire code capacity. And so we could start doing that if we wanted. We could also have outdoor meetings up to 250 people, as far as I understand, with social distancing and other requirements. There's a lot of requirements that are involved in still opening up a church. It's not, you just unlock the door and flip the lights on. There's a lot more involved in that as far as what they're asking from us. And so we had a lengthy discussion as to what ought we do. Now, understand that there are people on one side of the fence and there are people on the other side, and there's a whole host of people in between. Some say we ought not open at all. Some say we should open today and allow for ministry to continue to happen. And understand what the elders believe what we're tasked to do is to lead well. And we understand we're not going to satisfy every single person. That's very difficult to do. But what we're trying to do is minister the best way possible. So from the outset, I'm going to explain some things and challenge us on some things, but on the outset, I just want to let you know that what the elders have decided after much discussion and trying to figure out what would be best is we're actually going to hold off on meeting together. And with the target date that we're setting here is June 21st. That means 3 more Sundays that we're going to not be meeting together as a congregation. And I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why. The first reason why is as of June 1st, the governor has allowed various businesses to open at, like bars and restaurants can open, have 50 people outside, and with social distancing and all that good stuff. I mean, I'm not going to keep repeating that. We all know what is going to be required of these things. And businesses are starting to open. Shopping is kind of starting to happen in places other than Walmart, Target, and Sam's Club, and Home Depot, Menards, and places like that. So there's going to be more. Salons are going to be open up, and some of these other things are going to be opening up. And so we recognize that there's a lag time between when someone could potentially be infected and when they're showing signs of being infected. Now, the infection rate in Minnesota, especially in Duluth, is not that high right now. The problem is we don't know what the future holds, of course. And so we're looking at the safety still of the congregation. What we want to remind ourselves is we're trying to have a long-term view of what's going on here. We're not interested in just the here and now and just today. We have too many people today who are I mentioned this last time, materialistic, atheistic, who all they're concerned about themselves is today. And I know this has been difficult. Ultimately, the elders' decision is not one that we are super thrilled about because we want to come back this Sunday. We all desire, everybody who's watching this, everybody in the congregation desires to come back and worship together as if none of this was ever going on. Reality is, though, we're dealing with what we're dealing with, and there's not much we can do about it as is. And so after looking at some of the numbers and reading some of the information from the CDC and other government officials, we decided that the best thing to do is kind of wait and see. Because when things start to open, we're not sure what the lag time, we're not sure what's going to happen after that. So it might take, 5 days later, it might be 10 days later before we start to see a dramatic spike. We may not see any spike in that at all. And if that is indeed the case where we don't see a spike, then we're good to go. But the problem is if we indeed open up and we, get one person comes in who's infected, and we're in close quarters. And even with social distancing and masking and things like that, there's still the potential. So we can't pretend as if somehow social distancing and masks are the end-all be-all. Of course they're not. Some people may come in and not desire to wear a mask, and some people may be wearing a mask, and we are going to cross each other closer than 6 feet, of course. Anytime you go to the store, people cross by each other closer than 6 feet. This stuff is unavoidable. We have to make sure that we're not pretending as if somehow we're living in bubbles. We recognize that there's going to be, there's going to be issues, long term from this. And what we have to recognize as well as this, that of course the rise when things start getting open up, the rise in cases is going to go up. But is it going to be a gradual increase? Now, of course, we don't know. And all we're trying to do is just do the right thing long term for the congregation. I've heard from a number of people in the congregation who are really concerned about opening up again. And what we don't want to do is open up and we get 25 or 30 people or 50 people. Ultimately, that's not the church. The church is the church gathered. Now, of course, not every single person has to be here in order for the church to be gathered, but we don't want to try and create situations where we're not coming together. At least I will say that's my perspective. I'm really interested in the church coming together where we feel we are not fearful, we are not cynical, we are not looking at one another, judging one another. I don't want any of that stuff in the way to prevent us from actually worshiping. Look, if people want to come in and just be in the building, then that's one thing, but we don't want to just come into the building. We want to come in together and we want to worship together. And so I just want to encourage us to consider what that looks like. Now, just a few things. Understand that, first of all, we're living in very bizarre times, as you all know. And things change from day to day, sometimes week to week. And so these things could change for us. If we see a dramatic increase over, the next couple of weeks, we may have to say we're going to have to hold off. And the governor actually might say we're going to start to close things back down. I mean, we don't know. But if we wait till June 21st, the opening up of what's going on is going to give us a really good indication. And then at that point, unless there's the elders talked about this, we don't have a number. But if we didn't see a dramatic increase, we're good to go. And we will then commit to meeting from June 21st and on. And so what we're trying to do is just create a scenario where people are kept as safe as possible. I know that it's been difficult not meeting together, but a few more weeks versus the rest of our lives isn't really that, it isn't going to create that big of an issue. Now, I will say that I understand, some people are struggling spiritually. I understand that. I get that. But remember, you have elders who are here, Jordan, Mike, Troy, and I. We have deacons as well who can minister to you. And so if you're struggling, you need to be able to reach out to us and allow us to minister to you. We have been providing for you, and we're going to continue to provide elements for family worship on a Sunday. Remember, this is not taking the place of corporate worship. Family worship is family worship. We're not doing corporate worship together on Sunday. We will, starting June 21st. And the other thing about that is that we have a target date. So the worship ministry team and the trustees and all the people who are involved in making sure that the pieces are in place are going to make sure that those pieces are in place in order to have a successful reopening where we're coming together and we're super excited. So we have a target date that's really good for. A couple of other things. I just want to challenge us to think about, what are we trying to accomplish? So if you're trying to rush and you want to make sure that we're meeting together, what are you trying to accomplish? If you're trying to hold back and say we should wait a long time, what are you trying to accomplish? Ultimately, what are we trying to accomplish as a church? And that is spiritual growth and the worship of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ together. We talked about what are the pros and cons of opening, what are the pros and cons of delaying. We're going to continue to have the discussion over masks. I know some of you have said, I really believe we ought to require masks. I understand that. Some of you have said masks should be optional. I understand that. I think over the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a little bit better understanding and ultimately understand that the elders are going to decide what we think is best. And again, please understand, we're here to be unified. We cannot create a situation where one person says we ought to do this, we have to do things this way, and they will cause disunity if it doesn't happen that way. Or someone on the other side who says, well, this is the way it should be, and if I'm forced to wear a mask, then I'm not coming, or something like that. And we create this artificial divide that we ought not have. Life is difficult enough the way it is. Let us not create these artificial distinctions and these divisions over things that I think we can all agree there's nothing settled on this. And so I'm not saying we're going to require masks. I'm not saying we're not going to require masks. I'm saying we're going to give it some time as well to decide this. Since we're not going to be opening up for a few more weeks, we have time to look at this. So please understand. I also want to challenge you to think about not being cynical. It's very easy for our pride to well up. Let me start with that one first, I guess. We ought not be prideful, as if my way is the only way, as if somehow some people have special information that other people don't. Everyone understands the 6 feet rule. Everyone understands why one would wear a mask, because it protects everyone from that person. I understand that. I've had multiple people telling me this. Trust me, I've done enough reading on this. I understand. I really don't necessarily personally don't need to be educated on that, and I'm not so sure other people do as well. This has been going on for 3 months now, so I think most people understand this. Talking about the touch, the CDC has said, well, it looks like now maybe touching surfaces isn't as big as a deal as we thought it was. I think they're still trying to figure that out and ascertain that. But understand, you may feel that it has so much to do with touching of surfaces, so you wipe down everything. Nothing wrong with that. If that's what you feel comfortable with, do that. Just don't look down upon someone who doesn't do that. Or if you think I really must wear a mask, then do that. But don't look upon someone who doesn't wear a mask as if somehow they're not caring about other people. I just think that these are things that create division and can well up our own pride. We can quickly judge one another. And so we're just finding ourselves in a situation where it's really easy for our hearts to be turned. And on that note about our hearts, just recognize too, we have to really consider challenging ourselves on questioning people's motives. If you're in a store and you see someone wearing a mask, don't question that somehow they're fearful. Don't question without asking them or having a conversation. Can you explain to me why you're wearing a mask? Or if someone's not wearing a mask, don't look at them as if somehow they don't care. We question each other's motives without actually asking. If you have questions, especially in the church, ask questions. Find out from someone. Try and get their motive from their mouth, not from what you're trying to figure out on your own. Because that, again, I mentioned this last week or the week before, that which we don't know, we make up. And so we quickly judge one another. That's because of our sinfulness. Look, the reason why we have division and the reason why we're struggling at times in our own spirit, in our own soul, is because of sin. Our sinly flesh wants us to be right. And so what we do is we lay waste to everybody around us who doesn't agree with us because of our sin. Let us have compassion for one another and understanding for one another. We see things differently. We can all look at the same data, and we can interpret it differently. As of yesterday, and this is as of yesterday, 75% of all the cases in Minnesota of people who were tested positive were 59 years old and younger. 75%. 94% of the deaths were 60 and over. Now, I can interpret that one way, and you may interpret it another. What we can't argue with is the factual evidence that's been given to us. Now, of course, not everybody who has had the COVID-19 has been tested, and not every test is always accurate. And the death, as far as on certificates and what people think they're dying from, we get all that. I understand that. But, society is doing their best. The government's doing their best. People are doing it. Let's have that attitude and let's be part of the solution, especially here at Mount of Olives. I've heard a number of people who've emailed me or made phone calls and asked, can we do it this way? Can we do it that way? This is my suggestion for opening. Love all that kind of stuff, and elders are taking that kind of stuff into consideration. Understand that there were some people who showed some concerns about us opening, and the elders, again, took that into consideration. So I want you to understand we're hearing you, and we're not just sitting in the room, four of us just rolling dice, and whatever number pops up, this is what we're going to do. We had lengthy discussion, and it was a very good discussion, and there's a lot of acknowledgement amongst the four of us that we know this isn't the perfect solution, and we know that people are going to be disappointed. We understand all that, but at the end of the day, we had to make the decision that we had to make, and just as a reminder, we have a lot of ministry to do together. Hopefully in the fall of 2020, 2021, 22, 23, I'm hoping in 2035, we're sitting here looking back and saying, wow, that was a difficult time, but the church has grown, and it's grown in its spiritual growth, its strength, and it's grown in its numbers as well because we're reaching the community. I read an article yesterday in the Atlantic Monthly, and it was all about the roaring 20s of the 1920s. And they looked at the flu pandemic of 1918 and World War I, and they talked about the hundreds of thousands of people who died. And what was the result? Because they had to distance themselves as well at the same time. What was the result? Well, it was the roaring 20s. And people enjoyed, once again, getting together. And people enjoyed that contact. Why? Because we're made in the image of God. And because we're made in the image of God, we desire relationship. And so let us remember that on the back side of this, whether that's the end of June or end of July or end of August, whatever that looks like, we have a golden opportunity as Mount of Olives to be united and take John 13, 34, and 35 seriously. That people will know that we're the disciples of Jesus Christ for our love for one another. And if we walk into this with an attitude of, you know what, I'm not going to necessarily agree with everyone, but I'm going to be unified and I'm going to love my neighbor as myself, we will come through this in a way that glorifies Jesus Christ and hopefully is a light, a light on the hill, right? Where we're salty as a result of, and I mean salty in a good way, as a result of that, where we're drawing people and God is using Mount of Olives rather than continuing to be divisive. So be encouraged. We recognize it's a little bit longer, but the elders just think that this is the best thing for the entire congregation, is try and get as many in the congregation to come together. Check your pride. I have to check mine. I have personal opinions on this whole matter that I share sometimes and don't share. And there are things that I think we ought to be doing and things that we ought not to be doing as a society. But that's different than opening up the church. And I just recognize that as a leader, sometimes you have to take a step back and say it's not about your personal opinion sometimes. It's about what's good for the greater amount of people. And that's one of the reasons why we're holding off. And remember, the other reason why is we're just waiting to see that lag indicator from June 1st, and then what happens after that. So that's really all I had for you today. Check your pride, check your heart, be patient with one another, have compassion for one another, and just remember that the things that Paul talks about, in Romans chapter 12. I've mentioned this before to us, and I just want to read this one more time so that way we have this fresh in our memory. If you're struggling in the with people in the congregation, I want you to go to Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12, verse 9. I'm just going to read and following, okay? So listen to these words, and whenever you're wrestling with the decisions that are being made by leadership, decisions that are being made by other people, decisions that are even being made in society with your neighbors, go back and read Romans 12, 9, all the way to verse 21. Take time. Perhaps this is something that you need to look at almost on a daily basis just to reorient your thinking. This is what it says. Let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil, hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal, be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord, rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Bless those who persecute you, and bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. For by doing so you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Boy, that's something we need to read on a constant basis. I need to check my pride. I recognize that. I sometimes struggle with some of the decisions that are being made, but ultimately I have to recognize that not everybody thinks the way I do, and that's okay. And that's the same with you. So go back. This is the Word of God, Romans 12, 9 and following. Go back and read that before you start. Even before you send an email, even before you make a phone call, even before you send that text, just make sure that you're checking yourself, because I know and all of us ultimately want to be together. And eventually, hopefully soon, we will be. June 21st is the target date. This looks like, Jordan mentioned this last night, it's light at the end of the tunnel, and that's the way we ought to see it. This is the target date. If things change, then we're going to have to, amend that. But for the time being, that's what it looks like we're going to do. I hope this has been helpful. I hope that you recognize the elders are praying for you, praying over the situation. We're soliciting, feedback from various members of the congregation. And so just understand this isn't, a random thing. We take this very, very seriously. I hope that you receive this well And I would love to hear any feedback if you have some, negative or positive. I recognize that some of you are really frustrated because you want things to open, and some of you really are concerned about opening. We understand it all. But look, continue to pray about this. Know that we need your prayers, and the congregation does as well. We have a whole world out there that needs to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. Let us have that in mind as we continue to pray that we would eventually open our doors and reach people with the gospel. In the meantime, be safe, Godspeed, and take care.